Consideration of receiving recommendations from Art Collins and Nathan Campo of Bar Engineering regarding the result of bid opening 10/6/2011 for the flood protection improvement project. Details and breakdown of bid information will be made available at the meeting. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I believe in your packet you have the summary of the bid tabulation for the project. If I could just maybe back up a little bit, I'm happy to say that we're at a point now where we can start construction. So we spent a lot of effort, reviewing it, investigating it, doing topographic, aerial flights of the city, soil borings, design discussions with the Corps and MnDOT, and getting the design complete. So we've received 2 bids for the work. There were around 14 firms that had requested plans. We received 2 bids. The low bid is around 1.1 million. Our engineer's estimate was in the 1.3 to 1.4 range, and the high bid was, I believe, around 1.6 million. So, based on the review of those bids and the other information provided with the bids, we would recommend going with Blitz Construction for that work. So that's our recommendation, and they are the low bid at the 1.1.
Our city engineer also has worked with that firm, and they come very highly recommended.
Yeah, and I think one of the discussions we had this morning is, it was regarding just receiving 2 bids. I think that a couple local firms that we talked to, Winona Excavating being one of them, had just received some other work, so they felt they were too busy to do the work. And some of the just rough discussions we've had with firms, out of the Twin Cities area and farther away, was that it's, the project has enough unique areas that it would be hard for them to mobilize, and based on the constraints of the project and the tightness, and it ends up being a rather large project, but it's spread out in a lot of small areas. Some of these firms like to come in and just move their large volumes of dirt and get in and get out. So I think that's part of the reason why some of the larger firms. So that's the recommendation. A couple other things that I handed out. One is up to this point, Bar Engineering has worked with Odemo Engineering and AET and Blumentritt on kind of the layout of all this, all the property issues, the permitting, soil investigation, and the design of that. That the efforts thus far have got us kind of to this point in the preparation of the plan. So what we've provided is a proposal working again with those same firms, moving forward with some of the construction observation, construction assistance. There were a few design issues like with the riprap and other things that were not included in the original work scope that are now included here. And then as well as documentation of the construction to FEMA and doing that certification once and those remaining items. And also there's some work in there for assistance with the city in dealing with a lot of the Corps inspection issues that came up earlier. And there's a lot of power pole utility issues where we're going to have to assist more on the civil side in working through some of that sediment removal issues and that type of thing to meet some of the requirements or the deficiencies that the Corps identified. So that's the work there. There's a kind of a 1-page summary table here, the colored sheet here that briefly looks at kind of the overall funding or available funds and expenses for the project. The top section there has the available funds. I think the city received a grant in June in the amount of $150,000. I think some of that may have been spent already, though that's what the asterisk there indicates. They also received a $1.2 million grant, mainly for the levee improvements and the work we're doing here. That grant is 50% cost share, but it's capped at 2% of the main household income based on the 2010 census. So that means the the maximum that the city would have to contribute is the $630,000. You know, so looking at those available funds, there's approximately $1.98 million available through the city's match and then those grants. Looking at the estimated expenses, you know, there's the $1.109 million for the construction. We've got some construction contingency in there, around 10%. And then there's some of the engineering and construction service costs there, which is, you know, outlined there and also broken out in more detail in the proposal. And then another thing that we have recommended to the city is, you know, all along as part of the project is to purchase 2 portable pumps. The city had one that was damaged in the flood, so this would be a replacement for that. It could be used for other things other than floods and flood fighting, but it could be used in the event if there were a flood and the power went out to the pump stations. They could be used there, and then they could also be used, you know, as a backup to the pump stations that are there. So they're 6-inch pumps. I think around 2,500 GPM or 3,000 GPM. It kind of depends on the head. So they're pretty good pumps and self-priming. And you know, we've worked with Jeff to kind of clarify what pumps might work. So that kind of outlines the overall, you know, funding budget for the project.
So there's 2 issues before the council. One is to accept the recommendation for the low bid, to award the project. Second is to approve continuing work with the agreement for management services. And I would strongly recommend that we adopt both of these, especially the management service, because trying to bring someone new on board at this point would take quite a while to get them up to speed. We've assembled a really good team, and under Art's direction, it's been going really well.
And what we're trying to do with that too is, you know, have Odemo, you know, the local firm, do as much of the work as we possibly can. You know, that they know the area, they know the benchmarks and all that about the city, and then, you know, can do it most efficiently. So I think that's one of our objectives.
Will this have a performance bond?
Yes. And a payment bond.
Is there a timeline other than, what is it, August of next year?
Yeah, that's when they're looking at getting it done. They're looking at starting at around November 1st, working for 6 to 8 weeks. And what they intend to do is do some of the backyard work where the construction is a little tight. And their thought is that, you know, if you get a little frozen ground out there, they might be less disruptive to the area, you know, because they'd be driving on that. And, you know, if you break through that little bit of frost, you should be able to get down. So the thought was they do the relief drains, you know, where they're coming out with like a big boring rig and drilling those, so they could easily do that in the fall, as well as some of the seepage collection system. And I think that there's also a benefit in that too, in that, you know, your groundwater tends to be lower then, so you don't have as many dewatering and water issues with that. Then they look at doing some of the sewer work over by Highway 43 yet this fall. They're part of the relief drains and the seepage collector over by Walnut. Probably we'll have to wait till the spring, and the main reason that is there's a fiber optic line in the area where they're going to be doing it, and they have to relocate that. And the word from the utility company is that material is in short supply, and they're going to have to wait 22 weeks to get that length of line to be able to do that. So I think, you know, relocating, there's about 7 utilities over there in that area between Walnut and the levee, and they're all going to have to be relocated. So there's a lot of complicated aspects to this project. You know, we've got, you know, levee construction, we've got fill, we've got work in the trout stream, we've got, you know, utility relocation, we've got tight construction corridors, we've got work in MnDOT roadway, we've got sanitary work, storm sewer work, so it's it's complicated. So
It's an ordeal.
yeah.
If it was easy, we wouldn't need you.